think it is not the way it is at all. I'm John Van Ness. I'm here to share with you my story of being present with my wife Pat through her deepening dementia and death. I want to show how my journey with Pat opened me to a new view of dementia, not an enemy to be fought, but rather a key to healing awareness and an opportunity to help one at the end of life make a peaceful approach to death. I also found new meaning for myself in living and in dying. What does it mean to be a human? To have a self? How are we different from robots or from Klingons? Can we lose this self? Can this self be taken from us by disease? Does dementia make one less human or more human? Pat and I became addicted to Star Trek: The Next Generation. Every Saturday evening we sat focused on the TV, eager to watch Captain Picard and the Starship Enterprise crew and to discuss their latest example of what it means to be human. One summer evening as we were watching a rerun, my excitement burst out remembering what was about to happen.
We don't have time for this! We have to save humanity!
Pat startled me with, "How do you know that?" And I shot back, "Well, we just saw this a couple of months ago." With an edge to her voice, she came back with, "I've never seen this before." Now, Pat's forgettery had often worked overtime, but never before had she forgotten an emotional scene like that only a month or so earlier. I said nothing more about her forgetting, so for the most part, I ignored her early symptoms of dementia. How easily fear, desire, and illusion cloud our vision. The last episode of The Next Generation had been aired on May 23, 1994. So that first hint of her dementia must have occurred in 1993, 19 years before her passing, and the 40th year of our marriage. After the Star Trek incident, I did work hard not to react to her growing irritability, her memory lapses, and her confusion. We simply agreed that I would serve as her memory bank. 7 years later, in 2001, I could no longer ignore Pat's behavior.
I guess the first time I was sure that there was something wrong was on my son's first birthday, which would have been 2004 in March. And she came to the birthday party. It was kind of a relatively big party with some family and friends, and she saw a 2-month-old baby and thought it was John. And we had to explain to her, "Mom, this isn't John. John's a year old. It's his first birthday." Oh, yeah, right, yeah, that kind of thing. It got my wife, Vicky, and me thinking, maybe there's something wrong.
She would start to forget who was in the room, like my nieces and nephews, her grandchildren, and she would not be quite sure who they were. She'd ask, "Well, who is that person and why are they here?" It's like, well, And there were times later in her dementia where she wasn't sure exactly who I was either.
Psychological tests revealed her clear loss of memory and executive function. From then till she died, Pat regularly took prescribed meds to slow her decline, with no way to evaluate their effectiveness.
She had all these meds she had to take, and they were just all in a drawer, and she had to take them, and my mom would forget, and it's like, "Do you know what meds you're taking?" It was all over the place.
Her condition continued to spiral downward. Here are some examples. Pat expressed outrage at our eldest son, Peter, and his wife for sending out invitations to our 50th wedding anniversary party.
At first, I was just furious, that here we are going out of our way trying to help make this the best party it can be, and she's not only ungrateful, but mistakenly thinking that we're trying to usurp her, authority, if you will, over the function itself. And then I realized, this is my mom. It's kind of what she was like, a lot. And again, it got worse. It was another one of those times when we knew that she was, or we were getting hints that there was something wrong.
Her dentist refused to treat her after she tried to bite him as he was working on a tooth. Without our knowledge, her psychiatrist had her driver's license revoked. When I drove, she became unable to follow where we were going, in contrast to her previously impeccable sense of direction.
I go back now and remember it, though, with the knowledge of what was going on and the memories of all the things that have happened since, and I'm perhaps a little bit more forgiving than I was at the time.
Where I noticed it start to really get more severe was when we would go out to dinner, and she would open up the menu and she'd say, "Oh, let's see, what would I like for dinner tonight?" And she'd read through the menu and she's like, "I think I'll have the duck." She put it down. And 2 minutes later, she'd pick the thing up. "Well, let's see, what are we gonna have for dinner?" My dad would say, "Well, Patty, you already decided on the duck." That was a pretty clear indicator that things were shifting.
Her anger exploded at unexpected times, such as punching one of our best friends at a public dinner. I had met Pat in Brooklyn, New York, in June of 1952. I was beginning an internship at a church not far from Ebbets Field. One evening I went to a meeting of leaders from several churches. When I entered the room, I found a sea of gray heads and one cute blonde.
And she was, a debutante, gorgeous blonde woman living in New York City. And my dad was a nerd science guy that became a minister. I mean, he was about his, it's like, the captain of the cheerleaders dating the nerd. It was this completely opposite kinds of things.
She got my attention. Things moved fast. I felt I had never met another person like her. I had found my soulmate.
She loved him desperately.
My fantasy life exploded and I found myself falling in love. A year later, we were married. I finally lost my virginity and my life changed forever. Pat's adventurous depth of soul and spirit attracted me to her like a magnet. When I discovered her humor, her delight in music and dancing, theater and art and literature, I found her unique and fascinating. Even our unconventional views seemed to match up. In our nearly 60 years of marriage, I never felt seriously attracted to any other woman. Over the years, as we raised 3 sons and welcomed their friends, we adored each other.
Always in love. Those two were in love like few people I've ever seen.
We also did have our share of conflict. Our sex life could include rolling on the floor in ecstasy, followed the next day by Pat wanting nothing to do with me.
Well, my mother was known for mood swings. My mother was highly volatile in terms of her emotional state in general. So various things could trigger her and kind of send her off on a little, she'd have temper tantrums, basically, kind of like a child.
Most issues we did settle in good spirits, but we could fall into huge shouting matches, including, "I am not angry."
My mother had outbursts and tantrums all her life. It got a bit worse at the end, but that was the kind of thing that we grew up with, so it wasn't terribly unusual.
A few years ago, my oldest son confided to me that when he really listened to our verbal fights, Mom was being crazy. She made no sense.
And I remember this very clearly, and Steve and I were sort of behind a door, and I turned to Steve and I said, I think Mom's crazy. You know, I don't know, I don't remember what the conversation was about. I don't remember what the fight was about, but it was a huge realization that there could be another side here. You know, Dad could actually be right.
She was a pain in the ass. I mean, she ruined lots of Thanksgivings and Christmas and, my kids, it's like, grandpa in a room on family holidays. It was always a volatile potential situation.
Her bursts of anger could hit me like lightning bolts over issues I could not understand. We observed a troubled 40th anniversary and began reshaping our marriage for about the 5th time. Having 5 marriages, as you know, with the same spouse provides more rewards and fewer hassles than 5 marriages with different spouses. In each of our relationships, I found fresh appreciation for new and surprising aspects of Pat. Despite her volatile emotions, my devotion to her deepened, and I appreciated this darker and more complex relationship. But Pat's memory loss and outbursts since Star Trek felt different. No way like our normal marital conflict. I had to name it dementia.
I really can't say when this was exactly, but it was long after I think we all, meaning our generation, noticed that my mother was not the same. At some point after that, my father pretty much admitted that fact.
My fear began to rise. What's happening to Pat? Is she losing her self-control? Is she losing herself? The woman I have loved all these years seems to be fading away. Since your psychiatrist could no longer be trusted, where can Pat get medical follow-up?
We saw what looked like a very heavy burden on him. And it made him tired, it made him anxious, it made him nervous.
How can I keep up with the house and yard work? And how can I maintain my own professional work? And how can I give increasing time and attention to Pat's dementia?
I think it was harder for me to see what it was doing to my dad even than to see what it was doing to my mom.
Now, my father lived with her day in, day out.
He was caregiver all the time.
In many ways, my dad covered for my mom for years, for much of their life together. Because he was he was often making excuses for her with other people, why she was the way she was, why she was so emotional, why she was difficult.
Is dementia attacking her humanity? Is my own humanity threatened? What's the key to maintaining our human qualities in the face of Pat's dementia?